The war began before the enemies of humanity had a chance to figure out how, that when they entered the Soul Sector it is, that the sector and its planets promptly said, "Here's your ass." On top of that, how could two entire extermination groups be completely lost facing species that had barely been able to be called an annoyance to their rule? Inside the council chamber, where the enemies sat discussing the matter at hand, another species walked in. This small, gray form walked up to the council and demanded to speak. The species was not dangerous by any physical means, but instead their technological prowess and strange techniques made them feared and respected. The gray form spoke. "We warned you all not to involve yourself with humans. Now you have inexorably tied yourself to them. Humans are territorial to a fault, and you violated their territory for what reason? Not only that, but you fired on what they call civilians. To a human, firing on a civilian population is against their doctrine. We are sure they sent you a list of rules, and I truly doubt that you followed them. For humans, those that agreed to combat have placed their lives in danger willingly. This makes them combatants. Loss of combatants is just a consequence of conflict to humans. It is acceptable. Once the battle's over, the captured are looked upon as non-combatants. This is simply another level of innocence to civilians. The humans will protect the innocent, even with their own lives. Anyone that assaults the innocent will feel the wrath of humanity." Before our scouts were detected, causing us to leave Earth, we recorded what humans did to those that forced themselves on the innocent. I can show you the recording, but it's quite ghastly. Most humans find an assault on the most vulnerable to be an unforgivable offense. The video played behind the speaker, showing a few men and a couple women being castrated, disemboweled before the corpse, if they were still dead, was strung up by the neck to show everyone. This is what humans do to each other when one assaults the innocent. He lets the image set for a while before he continues. It is also of note that humans have a strong ability to pair and pack bond with others. There are a plethora of stories that have many humans, quite literally, going through hell to avenge their lost partner or even pet. In fact, in the human cinema, one of the best-known series began with this exact premise, the exact same way. The video then changes to the battle groups going towards Earth. "We tried to warn you. We told you to only observe as we did. Humans are far more dangerous as they will find inventive ways to kill everyone and everything that stands in their way. Since you have attacked their innocence, their families, their friends, they will come for you all. We, being one of the 6, or should I say now 7, sentient species will not get involved. Do not come to us for assistance and do not try to withdraw into our territory." The gray figure turns to leave, and one of the taints stands and speaks up. "Is there anything you can do to stop them?" The gray stops, but doesn't turn around. He pauses for a second before saying, "You can sue for peace. You can beg for mercy. You can simply surrender. Above all else, you had better sign that document they sent and give it to them before—" The floppy then asked, Or what?" The gray simply paused, was still in contemplation, then placed his hand next to his head as though he's listening to something, before he continued to walk out, The gray, again without turning around, simply said, "Too late." The others on the council are confused for a few moments as the gray image walked out. Moments later, all of their devices began to blare warnings. Before any of them even reached for their devices, they all knew what it meant. The humans had arrived, and they are not happy. Sometime later, one of the enemies looked at the hollow map of the territories they hold. It's clear to see, over time, the tsunami of rage heading towards their homeworlds. When the human ships arrive in a sector, they immediately demand the locals to stand down and surrender. If this is one of the colony worlds, it has a very good chance of simply breaking under the onslaught. So they might just be smart about this whole situation and surrender. If they do, the humans arrive peacefully in massive suits of metal and inform the planetary governments about the terms of surrender. All those that surrender are absolutely astonished that they will not be taken off the world in chains. Instead, they are informed that the humans want intelligence and, of course, all military assets. This entire process would only take about 150 hours, after which the humans would seemingly disappear. With the world now incapable of interfering with the conflict, they just went back to doing what they do. If they arrived on the colony world with the floppy would simply hang there in front of them and bow in submission. Since they are a species that fears and respects strength, they recognize the danger. The taints are submissive until they realize all their information networks are about to be taken. At this implication, they get very aggressive. They only calm down when they're told that the networks are only going to be copied, not taken. Since they hold onto their own power through information gathering, blackmail, intimidation, and good old-fashioned fear, they believe that losing this advantage will cause them to fall prey to the other species. Though they would still hold on to this advantage, they were not exactly happy that now humans had this advantage as well. On Pantheon colony worlds, they would have at least 2 warships around it, always, something humans understood fully. Even facing a full-on battle group, the Pantheon stood their ground defiantly. This made many humans use a very old term, ballsy. Stupid, but ballsy. After getting the demand to stand down, the Pantheons would charge their weapons and simply wait for the humans to get within range. Before human ships get into effective coil gun range, they would send another message. Don't be stupid. Either stand down or evacuate your ships. We have no interest in unjust casualties. You have already proven your mettle by standing against a vastly superior force. You have earned our respect. Do not earn our ire. With only a single exception, the ships would then evacuate to the surface before scuttling their ship. This, of course, was something that humans figured would happen. The one that did fire on the human ship was turned into a drifting hulk next to the others in their defense fleet. The rest of the defenders surrenders after seeing the speed and precision of the human weapons to target a single ship in a battle formation and just take it apart. Garden and Agro worlds would not try to fight either, as they just didn't have the population to do so. However, the humans just took the ships and information, leaving the population shocked that they were not under the humans' whip. All 3 species were amazed how bloodless this invasion happened, and humanity conquered about 3 planets a month this way. Though seeing this tactic, many of those defending the planets believe that humans have no teeth and no real taste for battle. They believe that the home fleets will arrive after they destroy the humans outright. From the outside, that would be a reasonable assumption. However, the humans were about to reach the core worlds. As the humans advanced, the core worlds had continued to dig in deep. Many seemed to be like nothing more than elaborate killing fields waiting for the humans to arrive. The fleets are primed and ready to slug it out with the human fleet, just waiting there like a spider inside its web. The first and one of the best examples of humans' ability to conduct warfare is the Battle of mccraig. This planet is a major hub for commerce, which meant that all three enemies were protecting it. Numbering several hundred ships, they all took positions the moment that humans came out of FTL. The humans broadcasted to the defenders, but received nothing but insults in return. As each fleet prepares to fire, the humans send out the same plea as before, emphasizing that simply standing up against them is enough to earn respect. As the humans approached, on their ships, the sensor operator called out that there is a void in space. Confused, they checked, and after a quick check, it's cleared that there is something blocking their sensors. This is leaving a spherical hole in the sensor data. Switching directly to visual, they can see a strange ship in the center of this strange sensor void. With a simple command, all the human ship's turrets turn and fire almost simultaneously. For the Pantheon's floppy and taints, it simply looks like the humans are just firing off as a show of force. Though clearly enough to bring pain to the defensive forces, it did not stop their resolve, believing that they could face this much firepower. Then they see the human shots strike a ship that is not on their scanners. For a few seconds, they only pick up strikes of something. Then the twisted remains of a ship come across the display. The little Greys may not want to get into the war, but they did want to watch. At least, they tried. The enemy defense line watch as the human turrets pick off another two Grey ships that were using their own jamming devices. Now, the defense fleet is getting a little nervous. As the human fleets approach the planet, the defenders are given one last chance to stand down. They refuse. With a gesture of defiance coming across as the only message, the enemy fleets begin to charge their weapons to fire. Before they can, human energy weapons streak across the formations, just not from the front. A second human fleet had come in, jumped right out the FDL, and fired from their 9 o'clock and down 18 degrees. Then another barrage came from the 2 o'clock and 21 degrees down. With the main fleet firing, that means as all three of the human fleets are firing at the defenses at the same time, causing mass disarray. Within less than a minute, pods begin to be launching towards the planet from ships that have gone completely adrift. The human fixed weapons, turreted cannons, secondary cannons, and a mix of ballistic and energy followed up by a swarm of torpedoes brought true chaos to the enemy ranks. Each species seems to prioritize themselves over the cohesive formation, leading to even more confusion, losses due to collision and debris, the inability to focus fire, and the dance of ships that are as needed to avoid incoming fire made it far easier for the human ships to fire nearly free without worrying of returning fire. That is not to say humanity didn't take losses. Those captains that were able to keep a level head were able to return effective fire. Unfortunately for them, there was far too many that had panicked inside the defense fleet. The resulting debris field, at the end, slowly spread out, making the planet look like it had rings. Surprisingly, none of the alien forces used defense satellites, though this allowed the human forces to surround the planet much easier, leading to no issues as they took position. A message was then sent down to the surface before anything kicked off. It simply read, "Surrender or fight. We await your response." In a long expletive rant, the planetary governor made it clear that they would fight to the last breath. The human response was, big words from someone holding up in a bunker about a mile underneath the surface. Perhaps we should show you why we don't do that anymore. As the weapons aims, another response came from the governor, screeching about how the humans will suffer for dishonoring him. A human voice was heard cutting in from a simple squad leader on the bridge. After the governor's rant, the voice said, "We'll see how big he talks after we drag him out of that hole." With that, the invasion began. Orbital strikes of tungsten rods hit hardened defensive structures. Then, as fighters were released towards the surface, decoys, chaff, flares, and all other countermeasures are launched to protect the fighters on their way down to the atmosphere. Right behind them were the pods. So many pods. The drop pods are much faster than the fighters and would end up screaming right past them, causing more debris to be entered into the atmosphere at once. Once the pods are done, the shuttles are launched to bring heavy armor down to the surface. On the ground, the Xenos' defenses are going completely nuts, as there's far too much for them to track, especially since one of the countermeasures is a small EMP. Now, this EMP is not powerful enough to actually destroy the electrical grid. That's not what they're trying to do. But it is strong enough to force a shutdown of the sensitive sensors, or else they might overheat and simply burst into flames. Though it may only knock the sensors out for 15 minutes, while it simply reboots, you would be amazed what ground bounders can do with 15 full minutes. On the ground, the pods open to allow heavy armed and heavy armored humans to charge out, each one covered in weapons and carried a coil gun strong enough to eviscerate an armored vehicle. Pushing across the land, the armored humans didn't even notice the weapons used against them. The floppy still fight hand to claw, but quickly found out that they can't sting through the suit, and the suit allows the human to pick up a floppy twice as big as they are and simply toss it off into the nearest structure, many times causing a massive splat that sprayed across the face, head, back, chest, and legs of anyone close. The taints realize quickly that they're unable to stop the armored heavy units. Being so small in comparison, the humans just swatted them away as they charged past. The Pantheon's heavy weapons, designed specifically for hardened vehicles, seemed to slow the humans' advance, as they would actually strike a human and send them flying. This was until a massive explosion destroyed one of the heavy weapons after another. Those manning the cannons couldn't figure out what the hell just happened. They looked around to see what had just blasted them. It wasn't the humans in suits. What the hell was it? Then they finally saw the massive metal monstrosity that carried such a large ballistic cannon. They all wished they were drunk because they just got tanked. The heavy armor tore into position so effectively that many of the defenders abandoned their positions at the sheer sight of it. When another type of tank appeared, the defenders would just surrender immediately, never even firing a shot. This improved crocodile tank only had to show its ability to vomit sticky fire over 400 meters one time. This was even more horrifying than the handheld flamethrowers that the human infantry carried. In 6 days, the planetary governor was yanked out of his hole as his own staff had surrendered him. The governor still kicked and hit and cursed as he was lifted out with one large metal hand and dragged to the rally point. The governor cursed all the Pantheon floppy and taints still alive for being traitors and cowards. The taint in charge refused to surrender, even after being held up in front of everybody. The governor continued to squirm the entire time as though he could somehow weasel out of the hold, as one of the admiral's staff informed everybody that the war would continue until their government surrender. Their military equipment would be taken, but the rest would remain as they would need to use it to rebuild. They were informed about the other planets that have surrendered and those that they can still trade with. This surprised the living hell out of everyone around the planet. The last time a species had been beaten, they were forced into slavery to the point that they went extinct. The admiral speaking asked, "If anyone has an issue with this arrangement, then you're welcome to keep fighting." He was then interrupted by the governor yelling at the families nearby, claiming that they were cowards for not fighting for his honor. He cursed them out so much that finally a young male floppy next to his mate and children stood up and spoke. "Send the planetary governor towards me, and you humans will have your answer." With little hesitation, the armored human tossed the governor towards the crowd, where the floppy immediately penetrated him with his hard, pointy tail, then used his other tail to drive his hard shaft into the taint's mouth. Around, one of the armored humans muttered, "Well, that's one way to rip a taint a new asshole." The floppy that killed the governor was called forward and introduced by the staff member as the new planetary governor, after which the humans grabbed all the functional military equipment and simply left the planet. Not before making sure the wounded were tended, of course. Major routes were opened up, as they would need them for survival. From first shot to human departure was only 34 days. This march across space continued until the only planets left were the 3 homeworlds and the planet Aia. This is considered the political hub of all the species. All 3 of the opposing forces have actually requested an audience with the human leadership to discuss terms. When the human delegation arrived, everyone was shocked to see representatives of the tieflings with them. Yet when the council began to subtly say things like "traitor," they all could suddenly hear the strong metallic click of a safety coming off. With that, a tiefling female had to put her hand on a very, very muscular human next to her. With this, he took his finger out of the trigger well and put the safety back on. The council members were sent documentation that the humans gave prior to the meeting. When the leader of the human delegation addressed the council, he did so standing tall in full dress uniform. "You have all read the documentation sent. As you can see, the terms are simple. We humans have carved out a piece of the universe for ourselves, another piece for our allies, and our newest allies." He motioned at this point, referring to the tiefling community, a community that has actually exploded in numbers with every Pantheon planet taken. He continues with, "Upon signing these documents, you and your species have agreed to surrender a single sector each. Originally, we were not planning on taking any. However, it has been brought to our attention that if we do not take territory, then hostilities will not officially come to an end. This is written in your own bylaws. As such, upon agreeing to these terms, no ship from any of your species will enter our territory for a duration of 125 human years. At the end of this time, it will be assessed if trade may begin. We have done our best to leave your infrastructure intact, along with minimizing civilian casualties." That last line struck the council as they finally understood the true meaning of that statement, with civilians being something of innocence. He continues with that said, if you choose to continue with this conflict, then humans will go into total war. If that happens, the forces on your homeworld will be destroyed, your cities razed to the ground, and you will be left completely defenseless to whichever species thinks they can hide from us. What say you?" Realizing the truth in his words, the first to reach out and sign was the floppy. Since they respect its strength and, of course, honorable conduct, it would be a safe bet that they would sign. The Taints were hesitant as their pride of holding the galactic leash through information had been taken from them. Under his breath, the Taint's ambassador swore that he would get the humans back for what happened. It still signed. The Pantheon's ambassador, their version of a crowned prince, stood and asked, "How can we sign this when you have turned many of our subjects away from the path?" The human ambassador was a little miffed at this, but said, "The path of servitude? The path of slavery under your whims? We tried that before in our past, and it is now just a note in our history. Now we have had a few good leaders in our history, many of which were disposed of at the time for doing what was best for the population, not only the wealthy and those in what was perceived as power. Yet history always proves that those leaders that can toss away their pride to do what is right are given the greatest places of honor. So I ask, which one are you? Think carefully and remember this old human proverb: pride goeth before a fall. The prince then sits down as his people have a similar phrase. After another 30 seconds of contemplation, the prince reaches out for the datapad. Before signing it, he looks to the tieflings. You had better make peace with your choices, as they will deny you the ability to go home. A young tiefling male stands up and says, We have made peace with our choice. I can only hope that you can do the same. The prince signs the pad, and the human delegation thanks them for their time and simply leaves. True to their word, all human forces leave enemy space. The weary soldiers and sailors all just want to go home at that point, but first, they need to make sure that the tieflings are set up in their new colonies. Along with that, the Yankets have to be checked on to make sure they're able to rebuild, and the Kashmirs are able to recolonize the half of the planet that got basically glassed. Thankfully, everything works out on all fronts. The only big change is humans have taken back their introduction. No one likes the humans when they get angry.